911, what's your emergency?
Something's wrong. He needs help. Please send someone.
Is this part of the show?
No! He's turning purple. His eyes are wide open. He's dying!
Brian West, a celebrated reptile expert, was killed live on stage, strangled by the very python he raised, trusted, and performed with for over a decade. If stories like this make you question how close is too close when it comes to wild animals, like this video, subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Brian West was more than a performer. He was, in the eyes of many, a modern-day animal sage. At 42, he'd spent over 2 decades working with reptiles, earning a reputation as a respected herpetologist and a cornerstone of local conservation efforts. Born and raised in rural Tennessee, Brian found his calling early, rehabilitating injured snakes and lizards while other kids played video games. Over time, his backyard sanctuary grew into a small rescue center, and from there, a career took shape. He wasn't just handling reptile, she was educating the public about them. School gymnasiums, community centers, and wildlife expos across the South regularly welcomed Brian and his collection of non-venomous snakes, with Apollo, his massive Burmese python, as the undisputed star. Audiences were captivated not just by the snake's sheer size, but by the uncanny calm that seemed to settle over it in Brian's arms. His demeanor was always relaxed, almost meditative, as if his presence alone pacified the animals. On YouTube and TikTok, he gained a modest but devoted following, sharing clips where toddlers petted pythons under his watchful gaze or elderly women overcame lifelong fears during hands-on demonstrations. It wasn't just spectacle, was trust, or so it seemed. Brian branded himself as a snake whisperer, a man whose bond with reptiles transcended species boundaries. His approach was gentle, grounded in patience and presence. He rarely used tools or restraints, preferring instead to let the animal move freely around him. "They feel your energy," he said in one 2019 podcast. "If you panic, they panic. If you stay grounded, they mirror it." For many, Brian was more than an educator. He was a bridge between fear and fascination. A man who could dissolve generational myths about snakes with a single story and a calm demonstration. Family and close friends described him as thoughtful and deeply principled, someone who viewed his work not as a job but a mission. He didn't see snakes as dangerous, his sister told reporters after his death. He saw misunderstanding as the real danger. Those who knew him best say his connection with Apollo was the deepest. The python had been rescued from a neglect case in 2007, severely underweight and aggressive. Over the years, Brian raised him into a healthy 16-foot, 140-pound showpiece. He often said Apollo was, "Like a dog, he recognizes my voice, he knows my heartbeat." In countless interviews, he dismissed concerns about handling such a powerful predator alone. "He'd never hurt me," Brian insisted in a 2020 local news segment. "We've been together over 15 years. We've done thousands of shows." To onlookers, the bond seemed real, even beautiful, an unlikely friendship forged through mutual trust. But beneath the admiration lay a quiet tension that few dared voice. What happens when nature forgets its training? When love misreads instinct? In Brian's world, those questions had always been answered with confidence, until the day they weren't. Behind the calm confidence Brian West projected on stage and online, a storm of concern was quietly brewing among experts who had followed his career. Herpetologists, exotic animal veterinarians, and fellow handlers had long warned him about the escalating risks of showcasing Apollo in public performances. The Burmese python had grown into a powerful 16-foot, 140-pound adult male with a coiled potential that could end a life in seconds. While Brian often dismissed the concerns as fear-based misunderstanding, those in the field knew better. Apollo's behavior had begun to shift noticeably in the last few years, especially around his shedding cycles periods known to cause agitation, decreased vision, and heightened aggression in large constrictors. One of the earliest red flags came in 2021, during a routine feeding at Brian's home facility, when Apollo struck at his assistant, narrowly missing her face. The incident was kept quiet, but rumors circulated within the local herpetological community. That same year, an internal safety audit at a regional reptile expo flagged Brian's presentation as high risk, citing his lack of a second handler, the absence of safety tools like snake hooks or shields, and inadequate physical barriers between the snake and the audience. But Brian deflected the concerns, insisting that Apollo behaves differently with me. It's all about energy. According to one fellow reptile handler who spoke anonymously after the tragedy, Brian had total tunnel vision. He thought love was stronger than instinct. He stopped seeing Apollo as an animal and started treating him like a person in costume. More concerning still were the subtle behavioral shifts in Apollo himself. Once a steady feeder, he had begun skipping meals. His enclosure habits changed: more pacing, prolonged hiding, and repeated head pressing against glass, all signs of stress. During shows, he occasionally stiffened or hissed when handled, something he had not done in earlier years. Colleagues offered to step in as backup during large events, but Brian increasingly declined. He began doing more solo appearances, claiming it preserved the purity of the connection between him and Apollo. One friend, also a veteran snake handler, said Brian's confidence had transformed into something darker. It was like he had something to prove. He wasn't just teaching people anymore, he was performing trust, performing control. It stopped being about the animals. Behind the scenes, his circle of close collaborators shrank as he distanced himself from those who voiced concern. A few privately discussed staging and intervention, but Brian's charisma, his ability to downplay danger with reassuring calm, did hard to challenge him outright. To outsiders, nothing seemed amiss. The man, the snake, the show, it was all seamless. But those who knew the language of reptiles, who read the tail flicks, the body stiffness, the slight shifts in breathing, saw something else entirely. They saw the warning signs mount, one by one. And they watched, helplessly, as Brian walked ever closer to a line that nature had drawn centuries ago, that no amount of love could ever erase. It was supposed to be the highlight of the Afternoon and Educational Wildlife Festival in Austin, Texas, where families could bring their children to learn about animals in a safe, interactive environment. Brian West had been invited as a featured presenter, his reputation as a charismatic snake handler drawing a large crowd. Over 200 spectators gathered beneath the outdoor pavilion, many seated on folding chairs, children perched on laps or crouched near the edge of the demonstration space. Brian opened with smaller reptiles, letting kids touch a corn snake, laughing gently as one toddler squealed and hugged her mother. Parents filmed with phones, smiling at the rare opportunity for such close encounters, but everyone was waiting for Apollo. As the final act approached, Brian's voice took on its practiced cadence, the kind that straddled educator and entertainer. He spoke of misunderstanding, of fear, of the ancient symbolism humans attached to snakes. "But here's the truth," he said, reaching for the large cooler where Apollo rested. "Fear disappears when understanding takes its place." With a theatrical pause, he lifted the massive Burmese python and placed him slowly across his shoulders. Apollo's thick, muscular body glistened in the sun as he coiled languidly around Brian's neck and chest, his head resting just behind Brian's ear. For a moment, everything felt as it always had. Brian stood tall, calm, in control. "This," he said, gesturing to the python, "is what trust looks like." The crowd applauded. But then, something shifted. Apollo's coils began to tighten. It was gradual at first, subtle pressure around Brian's shoulders, a flex of muscle that most wouldn't notice. Brian's hand moved slightly to adjust the snake's body. His smile faltered, just briefly. A beat later, he gave a small, nervous laugh. "He's a little heavier than usual today," he joked, his voice strained but steady. The audience chuckled along. No one realized what was happening. Apollo's body continued to contract slowly, purposefully. Brian's free hand went to the snake's midsection, then to his own neck. His knees bent slightly, his balance shifting. He tried to speak, but the words didn't come. His face flushed red, then purple. His eyes widened. A teacher in the front rows, Donnelly, later interviewed on local news, stood up suddenly and screamed, pointing. "His ear, he's bleeding," she cried. That broke the illusion. The crowd gasped. Children began to cry. Several adults rushed forward, climbing onto the low stage. Brian's body was now partially on the ground, his limbs twitching. Two men grabbed Apollo's tail and tried to unwind the snake, but the python held firm, its body locked in a constrictor's instinctual grip. Others called 911, their voices rising in panic. One father attempted to wedge a stick between the coils, only to be shoved back by the snake's sheer force. In the chaos, a woman fainted. Another clutched her child and fled. Brian's body gave a final spasm, then stilled. The stage, once a place of learning and wonder, had become a scene of horror that no one present would ever forget. The call to 911 lasted just under 4 minutes, but it captured the full spectrum of confusion, horror, and helplessness that overtook the Austin wildlife event that day. In the recording later released to the public, the operator's calm voice contrasts sharply with the hysteria on the other end. "Can you locate a pulse?" the dispatcher asks. No, I don't think he's breathing. His face is purple. The snake won't let go," comes the desperate reply. In the background, children scream, adults shout, someone prays out loud. Within minutes, videos taken by attendees begin flooding social media. Grainy cell phone footage showing Brian crumpled on stage, Apollo still wrapped tightly around his limp form as panicked volunteers try and fail to intervene. One video garners over 6 million views in 24 hours, drawing a wave of shocked reactions, debates, and digital outrage. By the time emergency medical technicians arrive, the situation has deteriorated beyond a simple rescue. Apollo remains locked in place, unmoved by the noise or commotion. The EMTs attempt to pry him off but find the snake's constriction too powerful and too dangerous to manipulate without harming themselves or worsening Brian's condition. They radio in for specialized assistance. A wildlife officer, trained in exotic reptile handling, arrives with a portable muscle relaxant intended for large constrictors. It takes several attempts to administer the sedative safely. When Apollo finally loosens his grip, Brian is already gone. His body is lifted gently from the stage and covered with a thermal sheet. The cause of death, confirmed by the medical examiner on site, is asphyxiation and a crushed larynx. He had likely lost consciousness within a minute and died moments later. News crews descend on the scene almost immediately. By evening, every local broadcast leads with the same haunting headline: "Beloved snake handler dies, on stage in front of families." Reporters interview shaken parents, teary-eyed children, and visibly traumatized volunteers. One father recounts shielding his daughter's eyes as Brian fell. Another mother says her son hasn't spoken a word since they left. Crisis counselors are dispatched to the community center, and several local schools send emails to parents offering resources for grief support. A spokesperson for the event issues a somber apology. "We are devastated by what happened today. Our hearts go out to Brian's family and to every guest who witnessed this unimaginable tragedy. Effective immediately, we are suspending all live animal demonstrations until a full investigation is complete." But for many, the apology does little to ease the burden of what they saw. The stage is cordoned off with yellow tape. Apollo, once a symbol of awe and curiosity, is now viewed with a chilling mixture of fear and resentment. The very animal that had made Brian's career had ended it in the most public, devastating way imaginable. And though the crowd eventually dispersed and the tents came down, the trauma remained etched into memory, frozen in footage, and forever linked to a show that began with applause and ended in silence. In the days following Brian West's death, a chorus of expert voices emerged to explain the biology and behavior behind the tragedy. Voices that, tragically, had spoken up before. Leading herpetologists and exotic animal specialists were quick to point out that what many mistook for trust in Apollo's demeanor was something far less sentimental: thermoregulation. "Snakes don't bond like mammals," explained Dr. Lee Flanders, a reptile behaviorist with over 30 years of fieldwork. "Their calmness isn't affection, it's body management. They seek warmth, stillness, and security. When people project emotional relationships onto them, it becomes a dangerous illusion." Burmese pythons in particular are known for their immense strength and constriction capabilities. A full-grown adult like Apollo can exert several hundred pounds of pressure in seconds enough to cut off circulation and crush bone. And unlike an aggressive strike, a constriction doesn't require malice, just instinct. A sudden movement, a moment of discomfort, or even the shifting of ambient temperature can activate that ancient trigger. Experts reviewing the footage and incident report identified a cascade of fatal decisions that turned an already risky performance into a catastrophic failure. First, Brian performed without a spotter. No assistant was present to monitor Apollo's behavior or intervene. Second, he handled the snake with bare hands without any protective gear or emergency tools on standby. Third, and perhaps most crucially, he missed or ignored signs of defensive behavior. Witnesses noted that Apollo appeared unusually tense when removed from his enclosure that day. He reportedly flattened part of his body, a classic warning sign. Furthermore, the snake may have been in a pre-shed cycle, a period when their eyes cloud over, vision diminishes, and agitation rises. Pre-shed snakes should never be handled, let alone brought into a public setting, Dr. Flanders emphasized. They are unpredictable, disoriented, and more prone to react with force. The incident drew comparisons to past tragedies within the exotic animal community. In 2017, a snake handler in Ohio was found dead in his home, killed by a reticulated python under nearly identical circumstances, constricted during solo handling with no safety protocol in place. In 2019, a volunteer at a Florida reptile sanctuary barely survived after a similar constriction event, saved only because a second handler intervened with a metal prying rod. Brian's case followed a hauntingly similar trajectory, but unlike those private incidents, this one happened in front of a live audience, including children. The emotional damage extended far beyond physical loss. Another reptile expert, Marisa Talbot, noted, "The real tragedy? This wasn't unpredictable. It was preventable. There were so many off-ramps, so many signs. But when someone truly believes their love transcends biology, they stop seeing the danger." The post-mortem didn't just examine Brian's body, it examined a mindset, a culture that celebrates fearless animal handling without enforcing critical safety standards, that romanticizes special bonds over cold, hard science. And in doing so, it reminded the world of a brutal truth. Nature does not recognize affection. It recognizes vulnerability and responds in kind. In the wake of the tragedy, Apollo was seized by animal control officials and temporarily housed at a wildlife containment facility under 24-hour supervision. There, veterinary staff monitored his health while state authorities deliberated his fate. After several weeks of evaluation, he was relocated to a secure reptile sanctuary outside Houston that specializes in housing large constrictors no longer deemed suitable for public interaction. The sanctuary's director noted that Apollo displayed no signs of aggression post-incident, reinforcing what experts had long maintained. The attack was not the result of malice, but instinct. Still, his presence was now controversial. The snake that once symbolized awe and education had become a living embodiment of a cautionary tale. Public discourse ignited almost immediately. Should animals like Apollo, massive, powerful constrictors, be allowed in public shows at all? Animal welfare organizations and reptile advocacy groups seized the moment to push for reform. A petition demanding stricter licensing, mandatory safety protocols, and limitations on the use of large reptiles in educational entertainment garnered over 100,000 signatures in a matter of days. The State Wildlife Commission called an emergency hearing to reevaluate its regulations, while private exhibitors scrambled to review their own safety measures. For Brian's family, grief mingled with purpose. Rather than retreat from the public eye, they launched the Brian West Foundation for Reptile Safety and Education, aiming to provide training resources for handlers, support for responsible exotic pet ownership, and funding for sanctuary care. Brian loved these animals, his sister said at the foundation's launch. He died trying to teach people not to fear them. Our goal is to teach people not to misunderstand them either. Yet even as tributes poured in, the internet split over his legacy. A memorial video posted by his wife featuring a montage of Brian and Apollo set to gentle music went viral, but reactions were sharply divided. Thousands commented with admiration, calling him brave, dedicated, and passionate. But others accused him of reckless hubris, saying his choices endangered not just himself, but the public. "It was only a matter of time," one comment read. "This wasn't a hero's death, it was a preventable mistake." Former colleagues found themselves reflecting publicly and privately on their own practices. Several reptile educators posted statements detailing the new precautions they would adopt, including always having a second handler present and avoiding solo demonstrations with large species. A prominent wildlife YouTuber posted a video titled, "Why I No Longer Handle My Burmese Python on Camera," citing Brian's death as the turning point. The story continued to ripple outward. Months later, a full-length documentary titled Coiled Trust premiered at a regional film festival. The film explored Brian's life, the psychology of human-animal bonds, and other tragedies within the exotic pet world. It featured interviews with experts, critics, and supporters alike, painting a complex portrait of a man who blurred the line between love and risk. Meanwhile, the venue where Brian had performed quietly announced the retirement of all live animal shows, citing community concern and emotional trauma. The stage was cleared, the lights dimmed, and a plaque was installed in Brian's memory, not to celebrate the spectacle, but to remind future generations of the cost of misunderstanding nature. In the months and years after Brian West's death, one truth remained unavoidable, echoing through every expert interview, every retrospective article, every memory shared online. No matter how deep the affection, how long the companionship, or how peaceful the past instinct never dies, friends and family continued to speak of Brian with love and reverence. "He loved that snake more than most people love family," said his longtime friend and former assistant, choking back tears during a memorial livestream. "He didn't just care for Apollo, he believed in him. He believed that if you gave an animal enough kindness, it would remember. But nature doesn't remember. It only reacts." The bond Brian believed he'd forged so strong, so enduring, was in the end a human illusion, and it's that illusion that haunts those who witnessed the attack. Survivors of the Austin wildlife event, many of them children at the time, still post online each year on the anniversary. Some light digital candles, others share artwork. A few, more candidly, recount the nightmares that linger. "I thought he was acting," wrote one now, teenage girl. "Then I realized he was dying, and I still see that moment every time I hear applause." The trauma extended beyond a single show. It settled like dust over a community that had once seen live animal demos as joyful, even magical. The stage where it happened was eventually stripped bare, the banners taken down, the animal crates removed. Only a single object remained: Brian's wide-brimmed brown hat, left intentionally by his family during the cleanup. It sits there now behind plexiglass, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that love, no matter how sincere, is no substitute for caution. "He didn't die doing what he loved," one former colleague said at a panel discussion on exotic animal safety. "He died because he misunderstood what he loved." The distinction is subtle but devastating. In mistaking stillness for trust, in mistaking coexistence for control, Brian joined a long and painful list of people whose passion for animals blinded them to risk. His death became a case study in herpetology programs across the country, with textbooks referencing the danger of anthropomorphizing reptiles. Expert after expert reiterated the same refrain: "We don't tame nature, we just borrow its patience. And when that patience runs out, when instinct awakens, even for a second, the consequences are irreversible." Brian West was not a fool. He was not malicious. He was a man who believed too much in something he could never fully understand. He believed in a bond that biology never promised. And in that belief, he inspired thousands and left hundreds traumatized. So, when the story is retold, and it will be retold, it must be done with clarity and with honesty. Because Brian's legacy is not just a tragedy, it's a warning. A final act, performed before hundreds, that asked a question with no soft answer: what happens when love forgets that nature remembers? And the chilling truth? Nature always does.